One moment, please. If you could just pause this video for a second. Have a look at the photo. What do you see? You probably see an ordinary rocket. But don't be fooled. This image comes from the Cold War era. Most of us today can barely remember that period. It's been over half a century since those two superpowers, America and the Soviet Union, stared each other down and teetered on the brink of annihilation. Now we can look back and assess how this era helped change our world forever. During the Cold War, ordinary people went missing and suddenly found themselves accused of being spies. Families were ripped apart by suspicion. Sometimes the truth was stranger than fiction. A rocket so powerful, so terrifying that it shook entire nations. It was called the V-2 rocket, born in the darkest days of World War II. This machine of destruction unexpectedly became the foundation of the space age. How did America secretly bring a Nazi scientist to their side? And how did that scientist help make the dream of landing on the moon a reality? The story you're about to hear is full of shocking twists. This is the hidden history of the V-2 rocket. It all began with a boy who loved the stars. Wernher von Braun was born in 1912 in East Prussia. Even as a child, he dreamed about space. In the 1920s, scientists and hobbyists were experimenting with rockets. At first, they tried attaching rockets to cars, then airplanes. Of course, many experiments failed, but the dream of space travel refused to die. In 1923, a book by German scientist Hermann Oberth described how rockets could make interplanetary travel possible. The idea fascinated young von Braun. By the 1930s, he was already part of rocket research groups in Berlin, chasing a dream to go beyond Earth. But why did Germany focus so much on rockets? After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles limited their army and weapons, but rocket technology was not restricted. That meant scientists could experiment freely. Meanwhile, great thinkers like Konstantin Tsiolkovsky in Russia and Robert Goddard in America had already developed the mathematics of rocketry. In 1926, Goddard launched the world's first liquid, fueled rocket. The pieces of knowledge were spreading worldwide, but Germany and von Braun would be the ones to turn theory into a terrifying reality. In 1932, von Braun's talent caught the attention of the German army. Only months later, in January 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power. Hitler quickly understood the military potential of rockets. Von Braun wanted to reach space, but the Nazi regime wanted weapons. His dream would have to wait. By 1937, the Nazis built a secret test facility at Peenemünde on the northern coast of Germany. Here, von Braun became technical director of rocket development. It was at this site that the world's first closed-circuit cameras were installed, just to monitor rocket launches safely. 4 years, development continued in secrecy. Then, in 1942, the leadership of Nazi Germany decided it was time to put the new weapon into action. They assigned a name Vergeltungswaffe 2, which translates as Vengeance Weapon 2. But everyone just called it the V-2. It was ready for action against Britain. On September 7th, 1944, the first V-2 rocket struck London. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Over the next 6 months, more than 3,000 rockets hit London, Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. Thousands of civilians were killed, but there was another horror. The V-2 South were built inside underground tunnels using forced labor. Prisoners worked in deadly conditions, starved, beaten, and killed if they slowed down. For them, every rocket launch meant not only destruction abroad, but death at home. By late 1944, the war was going against Germany. The British discovered Peenemünde and bombed it heavily. Rocket production was moved underground, but it was too late. The Allies were closing in. Von Braun knew Germany would lose. In the final days of the war, he made a critical choice. He gathered his team, destroyed sensitive documents, and instead of surrendering to the Soviets, he chose the Americans. He knew the Russians would treat him as a war criminal. The Americans, he hoped, would see his value. On May 2nd, 1945, German forces surrendered to the Western Allies. Von Braun kept his head low until the end of the war. When American intelligence officers arrived at Peenemünde, they found notes identifying von Braun as the leading scientist. They tracked him down and brought him to an American camp. There, along with hundreds of other German scientists, he waited to learn his fate. Some of the prisoners looked dangerous, others merely bewildered. Among them was Arthur Rudolph, who had overseen the V2 production using slave labor. He would later be sent back to Germany to stand trial. But von Braun was selected for something different. In 1946, the US announced Operation Paperclip. This mission brought more than 1,600 German scientists, including von Braun and his rocket team, to America. It was controversial. Many of these men had worked for the Nazis, even the SS. But America was desperate. The Cold War with the Soviet Union had already begun, and rocket technology meant power. Before long, every major nation would want that power. So America offered these German scientists a deal. They would receive citizenship if they shared their knowledge. And what knowledge that was. America suddenly possessed the best brains in rocket science. The scientists were taken to New Mexico. There, at the White Sands testing grounds, they launched captured V2 rockets for the US Army. These tests laid the foundation of modern American rocketry. In 1957, the world was shocked. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first satellite in orbit. America panicked. As the US watched the Soviet Union achieve one milestone after another, there was growing concern that the Soviets might soon attack with nuclear missiles. This spurred America to invest heavily in its space program. And so the race was on. In 1958, President Eisenhower established NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Its purpose: to win the space race. 2 years later, von Braun and his entire team were officially transferred to NASA. While the Soviets achieved first after first, satellite, first animal, first human in space, America had one final card to play: going to the moon. And for that, they needed von Braun. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy announced the goal of landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. It seemed impossible, but NASA was undeterred. Wernher von Braun led a team of more than 30,000 engineers and scientists. Together, they developed the massive Saturn V rocket. It was a gigantic construction of stainless steel, over 365 feet tall, weighing 6.5 million pounds. The rocket consisted of 3 parts: the Saturn 1B, the command module, and the lunar module. It would take 120 tons into space. By 1966, the rocket was ready for testing. Soon, it became clear the project was a success. On July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 left the Earth. On board were astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Their mission? To land on the moon. At 10:56 p.m. Eastern Time, Armstrong and Aldrin landed the lunar module in the Sea of Tranquility. 6 hours later, Neil Armstrong stepped off the ladder and onto the moon. He gazed around and told Mission Control, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Over the next 2 days, Armstrong and Aldrin explored the lunar surface while Michael Collins piloted the command module in lunar orbit. They collected rock samples and planted an American flag. It was a moment of national pride. So who really won the Cold War? America placed a man on the moon. Yes, but it did so with the help of a man shaped by one of history's darkest regimes. Wernher von Braun, former Nazi officer, became the father of the American space program. He received many honors, including the NASA Distinguished Service Medal. Von Braun became famous. Magazines put him on their covers. TV shows featured him as a hero, and yet no one forgot his past. In 1979, a CBS documentary revealed von Braun had been in charge of launching V2 rockets during the war. At the time, he was promoted, not punished. But decades later, this revelation caused outrage. Critics demanded that von Braun apologize. He never did, and just 3 months later, he died. As for the V2 rocket, it left an enduring legacy. This was the very first long-range ballistic missile. It paved the way for every rocket that followed. It may have been born from terror, but it ushered in the space age. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned for more.